Thank you for being here, and also I would like to start by thanking all the staff at the Bodleian Library that I had the pleasure to meet, starting with, of course, Alex and Rachel, Ernesto, Chris Fletcher, all the brilliant Elena, all the beautiful librarians and curators that I have the occasion to meet. Like, you've really made this a wonderful research opportunity. So I've had the pleasure to attend many coffee mornings during my stay here, and often they were populated by medieval manuscripts. But what I want to do with you today is actually to go a bit closer in time to the 20th century and to a specific history of technology, which has to do with wireless radio and Guglielmo Marconi, the Marconi Company. So since the early 2000s, the Bodleian libraries have kept the Marconi archives, which consist of both the personal papers of Guglielmo Marconi and the company archives. Specifically, what I'm looking at are the two major companies, which are the Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company and the Marconi International Marine Communication Company. Especially here and in Italy, Marconi is one of the heroes of invention, that are celebrated and revered for their genius, innovation, invention in science and technology. But, and in the case of Marconi, we notice that he's also been sometimes appreciated or celebrated in the form of a saint. So what I want, beyond this, beyond the exploration of his scientific and entrepreneurial biography, which has been very much explored even here at the Bodleian Libraries, what I wanted to do is look at the company archives and look for clues of how the companies fashioned themselves through their history and in relation to their founder. And to capture this, I turned to trade exhibitions and anniversaries, looking for in the archives for the presence of objects and stories. I've also collaborated with History of Science Museum, which has a wonderful Marconi collection, to understand this and to understand objects and stories that the company considered to be historical or foundational of their existence. So I turn to the first object that we have here, which is in Marconi 1707, which is a pamphlet, an ephemera, from one of the two biggest 20th century exhibitions that have happened in Britain, the 1924 British Empire exhibition, and the other one, there is also another ephemera, which is another pamphlet from the 1951 Festival of Britain, which happened to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition. Under MS Marconi 1707, so we find these two pamphlets, and one can mostly read in the first one, the 1924 one, the technical novelties that the company was presenting to the public as a form, of course, of public relations that were entertained within trade exhibitions like a normal company. That also included historical equipment. And what do they mean by historical equipment is actually very well referenced in the 1951 Festival of Britain exhibition, because there is a whole section dedicated to historical equipment only. So what do they mean by historical? It's very hagiographic. It completely celebrates Marconi and the miracles of radio, radar and television, so these three technologies. We read on the other side of the pamphlet, actually, about the genius of Marconi and the sense of the participation of the company to the Festival of Britain to basically include themselves in the legacy of the nation. I will mention some of the important experiments that are constantly mentioned in these exhibitions. Might not mean anything to you if you don't know anything about technology, but follow me. So one of them is the 1897 historical equipment from the British patent that actually allowed Marconi to establish the company in the UK rather than in Italy. In Britain rather than in Italy. Then the other one is the 1902 magnetic detector. Then we have John Ambrose Fleming's diode valve, and this is always interesting, Melba's carbon microphone, from which the first BBC radio broadcast was transmitted. But, and if we move to MS Photograph B71, we can also appreciate some pictures of the cabinets curated by the Marconi Company about the birth of the radio for the Festival of Britain. So they basically, within trade exhibitions, they organized museum exhibitions with historical exhibits from everyone to see, not just for people interested in buying stuff from the Marconi Company. And Marconi is represented together with other important heroes of invention, including, for instance, James Clerk Maxwell. But also, you can see that, like, the experiments and the historical equipment presented is always the same throughout any exhibition that I've seen. All this equipment that I've mentioned about is always there. It's like, and we're gonna see it later, as if it was a script of how to tell the company's history. Another major set of celebration for the Marconi companies were jubilees. And I've explored two jubilees, the two jubilees of the two major companies, the 50th anniversaries. One was in 1947, and it was the jubilee of the Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company, and also the celebration of like 10 years after Marconi's death in 1937. So if we move to Memes Marconi 1740, this box contains all the ephemera related to that jubilee. But what I chose now is this booklet, summarizing the history of the Marconi Company, mostly made of Marconi's experiments and achievements. When opening the book, we actually find another tiny card that tells us this object was donated by someone in the Marconi Company to someone else. And it actually reveals a moment of turmoil within the company, because the company had just been bought by the English Electric Company, and not everyone liked it. So I'm gonna read this card that I've transcribed for you. It says, "This is the Marconi Jubilee book, and the only one we published so far. It is a poor effort. The Marconi Company was bought by the English Electric Company in 1946, after nearly 50 years of independence, and Marconi men are not pleased that the chairman of the latter company should give himself publicity in such a pamphlet, which is in bad taste anyway." So the publication contains indeed a foreword by the chairman, George Nelson, who mentions the entrance of the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company within the English Electric Company, the English Electric Group of companies, and the Cable and Wireless Holding Limited, which was a bit of a stir within the company itself. For the 1947 exhibition, the 1947 Jubilee, there was also a historical exhibition that you can see here, yes. In MS Photograph, no, sorry, we have to come back to MS Photograph B71. Happens. And we find some pictures of the display setup, which are here, yes. And that includes, again, a celebration of Marconi himself, a giant M placed within the exhibition setup, and this bust of Marconi with like wireless radios, wireless waves within, the exhibition, as if Marconi is represented as a totem, as someone that needs to be there even though he's dead. So you see that like there is a script, there is something going on with like the Marconi Company, always referring with the same way, with the same historical equipment, with the same reverence to its founder. The second Jubilee that I've seen and that I'm closing is the 1950 Jubilee of the Marconi Marine, which actually has a different story with respect to Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company, because it was founded in the 1900s in Belgium, not in the UK, and it basically revolved around safety at sea, rather than radio, telegraphy, and so on. So in MS Photograph B103, we find some curious pictures of the two events that happened during the Jubilee, the delegates' dinner and another exhibition, of course. And in the delegates' dinner, I invite you then to come closer when you can. The major 1897 experiment, the wireless telegraphy patent that I was telling you about before, is actually placed in front of the delegates' table, hosting George Nelson, the president of the English Electric Company, now president of the Marconi Companies, and Giulio Marconi, Marconi's son. So it's very weird to see, again, this totemic element exactly in front of George Nelson speaking, present at the dinner together with everyone else eating. Then we can turn to the exhibition, which reconstructs basically wireless ship cabins and the history of them from 1900 to the state of the art at the time, which was 1950, emphasizing the presence of two major technologies, which were the radar and the direction finder. So the exhibition showed this kind of cabins, and it was actually hosted at the Baltic Exchange exhibition, which, if I'm not wrong, was placed in the city of London. It was bombed in 1992 by IRA and is now where the Gherkin is. Finally, cherry on top, I wanted to show you MS Photograph C357 because it contains pictures of the delegates' dinner and the exhibition with an object that has been an obsession of mine ever since I did my PhD, which is a cigar box. A reproduction, it is actually a reproduction of the magnetic detector in a cigar box that was made in the 1930s to celebrate a 1902 experiment within Italy, so by who knows who, but it's datable to the 1930s, so the Italian fascist period, to basically diffuse Marconi's myth around the world and mostly present him as a person with a sort of like makeshift eureka genius, that from makeshift material like cigar boxes and some cables and wires, he's able to like make an invention. And what really stunned me is the fact that I've only seen these objects, of which there are many copies, in Italian museums dedicated to Marconi. I've never seen one in a British museum or in an American museum or in a Canadian museum and so on. And this is the first time that I've seen one. It's over there, yes. So it's interesting to see that it's given as a gift from Giulio Marconi to George Nelson at the Marconi Marine Delegates Dinner. And sorry for the moment of self-promotion, but I've written a lot about it on several publications, and there's also a book coming out about it in January. It's called The Cathedrals of Technoscience, and it's going to be published by Palgrave Macmillan, and it's about exactly this sense of relics and saints of science and technology, and how this talks about our relationship today with science and technology, scientism, technophobia, techno-optimism, and all this stuff. So to conclude, what this research actually made me understand, and I hope that other people will join the venture as well, is that these kind of sources can be read both with and against the grain, to follow objects within them, to analyze by analyzing ephemera, by attending to heritage, and it actually allows us to tell different stories of different histories of science and technology, and actually make sense of our relationship with them. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you so much for your enthusiasm and learning. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the Bodleian. So please keep your eyes peeled for one of those cigar boxes.
Yes.
We would definitely add it to our collections. Part of the point of these gatherings is so that people can talk further with our speakers and come and have a closer look at the materials. So thanks once again, Roberta.
Thank you.